After all the talking points, the story is false, said the Prime Minister. Jody Wilson-Raybould should have spoken up earlier if she felt pressured into making fraud and bribery charges against SNC-Lavalin go away, he said. She never would have been shuffled if Scott Bryson hadn't first resigned, he said. Asking for her to testify to Justice Committee is a witch hunt, said another Liberal MP. Still, so many questions remain unanswered. Why won't the Prime Minister let Jody Wilson-Raybould, the former Attorney General, tell her side of the story? And why won't the Liberal-dominated Justice Committee call her to testify? Is the investigation being set up to fail? Let's find out. Joining me now is Carla Qualtrough. She is the Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Minister, it's great to have you on the program. I got to start with talking about this Justice Committee. The Liberals on the committee control that committee. They refuse to call the very person at the heart of this entire story, which is Jody Wilson-Raybould. How do you justify not wanting to call her in an investigation?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Evan. And obviously, I'm not a member of that committee. What I understand the process that they've outlined is they've identified 3 witnesses, but it's my understanding that more could be called. I think we have to let them do the business of their committee and see where it leads.
Okay, but do you think, and you're speaking for the government, do you believe if there's any investigation, Jody Wilson-Raybould should be able to speak?
I don't think I'm actually in a position to say that. I think that, she can absolutely speak for herself, and the Prime Minister can speak for himself on these issues. But the Justice Committee is an independent committee, and they will make their decisions and they will call their witnesses, and this will proceed as it does in committee, independently of anything I may feel or not feel about how they should do their business.
The bottom line is, nobody believes this is a true investigation if you're not going to actually call the people who need to talk. So let me ask you another question. Parking the fact that the Justice Committee so far has not shown any interest in talking to Jody Wilson-Raybould, why doesn't the Prime Minister release her and waive solicitor-client privilege so she feels comfortable that she can talk? Why hasn't he done that?
Well, I think there's a couple of aspects to that question. First of all, it's not as simple. I can tell you this as a lawyer, as just waiving solicitor-client privilege. There's a couple of ongoing court cases. There's cabinet confidentiality, rolled into that. It's not just as simple as deciding that you're allowed to talk about X, because the repercussions of releasing that privilege can be quite significant. And I think it was prudent for the Prime Minister to ask the current Attorney General to explore options and see what can and can't be done reasonably and in the course of all these other things happening.
But here's the problem, Minister. You've got the new Attorney General, David Lametti, on this program. He's spoken about it. He said, I believe the Prime Minister. I don't see a need for an investigation. The Prime Minister is speaking about it. And I spoke to the former Attorney General, Peter MacKay, who's on our program later, and he said you can't partially waive privilege. Has the Prime Minister, when he speaks about that, is that implicitly already waiving it and allows Jody Wilson-Raybould to speak?
Yeah, I don't think I'm the best person to offer a legal opinion on that. I think that will come out in due course. I think we have to wade through all, the permutations of, you could imagine the Prime Minister and his or her Attorney General have to be able to talk frankly and with the absolute confidence that they can speak their mind and that's in confidence. As a lawyer, I can't advise my clients on what to do or not do if I'm worried that at some point in the future this is going to come out, because that's just not how our legal system works. It's such a foundational part of our justice system, solicitor-client privilege, that it can't be waived lightly.
Minister, what gets my spidey sense tingling is the lack of curiosity from the Liberal Party. I'm just trying to figure this out. A Liberal-controlled Justice Committee doesn't want to hear from Jody Wilson-Raybould. The Prime Minister hasn't openly said I'm going to talk about it, she can talk about it. Your colleague has resigned. There's now allegations that there was pressure by SNC-Lavalin. SNC-Lavalin had 14 meetings with Prime Minister office officials about a deferred prosecution agreement. Are you not curious what happened there? Don't you want to know some fundamental answers if she was pressured and why she resigned?
Well, I think we need to step it up a level, Evan. I think we need to understand that the role that all of us have as cabinet ministers is to, advise the Prime Minister confidently and to challenge decisions around the cabinet table. And I feel that if I had ever felt any kind of pressure that was undue or untoward, that I had an obligation to go to the Prime Minister. I know if I felt that one of my colleagues was being so pressured, I would also have that obligation to go to the Prime Minister. And I think this was a public policy decision that played out last year to get Canada into the business that other countries are in of deferred prosecution agreements. And this is how this has played out. It's an independent
decision
of the public prosecution
I mean,
office.
you're in cabinet. If she didn't feel pressured, what do you think is at the heart of her resignation then?
I'm not privy to her rationale for resigning. I would not speculate. I apologize. I think as was the Prime Minister, I was surprised that this happened this week. It was not something I personally certainly expected to happen. I was saddened by her choice to leave. I think she's a valued contributor in the robust and difficult and complicated conversations we have at the cabinet table. And the best person to kind of get into that discussion with is uniquely her.
Yeah, which is why everyone wants the Prime Minister to say, please speak. Let me ask you another thing. The Prime Minister said this. He said, I'm surprised, I'm disappointed, but it's not, what she's done is not consistent with the conversation she's had with me, he said. And he also said it was her responsibility, as you've just said, to speak up if she felt pressured. Essentially, the Prime Minister is saying either it was a dereliction of duty because she did not speak up when she should have, or she's not telling the truth. She's lying. Is that really what the Prime Minister is saying about Jody Wilson-Raybould?
I will not speculate as to what he meant by that. But once again, I'll reiterate that I feel a very strong duty to Canadians and to the whole process that if I had ever felt, which I haven't, Evan, and I can tell you, I manage tough files myself, and I have frank conversations with the Prime Minister and his office, and if there was ever any time when I felt that I had been pressured to do something that, it was inappropriate levels of pressure, I would have gone to the Prime Minister, and that hasn't happened in my experience. I've not had conversations with colleagues where they've confided in me that that's happened to them, at which point, again, I would have felt an obligation to go to the Prime Minister.
But is the obligation on a minister to speak up against the Prime Minister's office, or is it the obligation of the Prime Minister's office to act legally and not try to pressure the Attorney General? And remember, she's in a different position than you are as a minister. The Attorney General's position is a very different position, and they're not allowed to try to have political interference. So this is different. Other ministers say, well, I never felt pressured. That's a whole different ballgame. She's resigned now. It's in stark contrast to what the Prime Minister said. Do you believe it's her responsibility to speak up, or is it the Prime Minister's office not to break the law?
Well, I think there's a dual responsibility there, as you've outlined it. I think that we all have to respect that sitting around the table wearing the hat of Attorney General, that is a very different function, as you pointed out, than a cabinet minister. So I think but in that regard, isn't it then a heightened responsibility to speak up when you feel pressure, if you're in that unique position around the table with that independence? Absolutely is the Prime Minister's office obligated to act within the confines of the law, for sure. And there's no evidence. I have no understanding that that's even at play here.
Finally, fair question to ask in your mind, if she was both demoted because she wouldn't play ball with the Prime Minister's office, who are trying to give a deferred prosecution agreement to SNC-Lavalin. She wouldn't play ball. She wouldn't recommend to the public prosecutor's office, you know what, give them the sweetheart deal to avoid a criminal prosecution, and she's busted down to do it. What do you make of that theory?
Well, first of all, I kind of reject the idea that fundamentally DPAs are sweetheart deals. We can have that public policy discussion, I guess, if you want another time. But I'm not going to speculate. I have every confidence that when the Prime Minister said that this is a brand new tool, this tool just came into law, when he said very clearly to the former Attorney General that, I'm not directing you to do this, this is an independent decision, that was what happened. I have no reason to believe otherwise, Evan, and I have every confidence in him.
Finally, Minister, should she be allowed to remain in caucus? She's left the cabinet. She hasn't said anything. Should Jody Wilson-Raybould be allowed to remain in the Liberal caucus as part of your party?
That's again, that I think that will play out. I think that there's a discussion to be had if she, as I understand it now, is remaining in our caucus and still believes in the platform and the vision we have for Canada. I welcome her in our caucus. She's a bright, competent, thoughtful person who would be a valued member in our caucus, and I hope she stays.
I got to leave it there. Minister Qualtrough, great to have you on the program. Thank you.
Thank you.